Hello, people. Welcome again this week for this video discussion topic that I will be talking about today is young people involvement during the civil rights movement. This topic will kind of reflect back what I was talking about 2 weeks ago about the Nashville sit-ins, but I'm gonna go in talking about young people in the civil rights movement. This topic is very interesting to me because um, I was thinking of focusing on doing my dissertation on this topic. Young people, of course, as we should know, play a very important role during the civil rights movement. You seen their involvement during the it can go back to the 1944 Brown versus Board education with civil rights activists like Barbara Rose Johns. You can go to Brown. You can go to the sit-in movement that happened in the early '60s, including the Nashville sit-ins in Greensboro. Of course, you can look at the Freedom Rides, similar to Montgomery marches. The list goes on and on. College students that were desegregating colleges, like James Meredith, etc., etc. Two sources that I found that was pretty interesting in that topic is the first book, which is called "From Sit-ins to SNCC: The Student Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s" by Ewan Morgan and Philip Davis, and the second book, after the rebellion, Black Youth, Social Movement, Activism, and the Post-Civil Rights Generation by Soku and Franklin. Both of these are very interesting sources because they focus a lot on the young people in the civil rights movement, but also have different perspectives. Like the first book, or first source I mentioned, focus more on and give an analysis of how students, how the early civil rights movement was, how the sit-ins movement basically was a big impact, basically desegregation of lunch count, including the Nashville sit-ins. And you see that what came out of the sit-ins like Greensboro, the Nashville sit-ins, were featured civil rights leaders like Diane Nash, James Bevel, John Lewis, Bernard Lafayette. The list going on and on. As I mentioned, the Nashville sit-ins. Of course, this will of course led to creation to SNCC by Internet Baker, and some of the founders of SNCC was people like Diane Nash, Bernard Lafayette, who will go on to be in the Freedom Rides, similar to Montgomery marches and March Against Fear. Student Nonviolent Coordinated Community, as they called, but nicknamed SNCC, was one of the major civil rights groups, along with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which were led by Martin Luther King in the 1960s, in the Congress of Racial Equality. And basically, the book just giving analysis on how it went from the student sitting movement to the SNCC, and then involvement in the major civil rights events. Basically, SNCC has a very interesting history. That they, at times though they got in conflict with a lot of the older civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King and many others, because they had different methods of ideologies, how they wanted to go in the movement. And also, too, one thing to know about the Freedom Rides, they were the major people involved in the Freedom Rides. And, of course, wanted King and the rest of the SLC to participate, but they refused to. And they also resented the facts that King and other older civil rights leaders would get most of the credit, and they was really on the front line risking their lives. But that's another story right there. That's just something to know. And also SNCC, too, though, will have conflict with leaderships, including with John Lewis and Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, where Stokely Carmichael wanted to turn the organization to be more pro-black and more radical than the more integrated group as well. But the first source basically just mainly focus on how sit-in movement, the young people that was involved in that will go on to be involved in other movements during the civil rights movement. The sit-in movement started with Greensboro, influenced other sit-in movement, and it spread, as I mentioned in past posts. Now, the second source focused more on the post-civil rights movement, on the more younger generation, basically, that came from the 60s, after the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and the 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1965 Voters' Rights Act, the new generation that was going during the 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. Some of these organizations that emerged was like the some of these organizations like the South African Campaign, the Student Negro Youth Congress, and many other groups. And basically, this book just not focused so much about the civil rights movement, but other young people's movements post the civil rights generations that will go on basically just to keep the movement going. And you can think of other groups like maybe the Black Lives Matters and many other organizations. But the second book just give more analysis of the post civil rights generation and how young people carry on the movement after the civil rights movement. But overall, like I said, this is an interesting dissertation topic I'm talking about because young people play a major factor during the civil rights movement. You can't really name one civil rights event that happened during the 60s that many young people, it was cheering during the Birmingham Crusade, the Birmingham campaign that was getting sprayed by water hoses, by dogs, or attacked by dogs, by water hoses, or you can't talk about the Freedom Rise, the city movement about college students. You had college students that desegregated schools like Ruby Bates or colleges like James Merida, etc., etc. You can't never every major civil rights event that young people play, including the national sit-ins where I mentioned it occurred a lot of civil rights leaders that was heavily involved in it. So this is a topic that is known but need to be more talked about. We focus a lot on people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, some of the older civil rights activists, but we need to focus more on the young people that's really on the front lines doing the movement. So it's something that to think about. But overall, that's all I really have to say about it, though. And I hope everybody enjoyed the video. You have a good day.